Excerpts from the chapter God Does Everything. In the tradition of the great yogis of India, Maharaji's powers extended far beyond the realm of knowing the minds of others. A profusion of miracles poured out of him, and though he threw dust in our eyes with denials and confusion, we were still allowed to sense this extraordinary process. But as astonishing and dramatic as such phenomena were, they were not, in the eyes of the close devotees of Maharajji, the essence of the matter. Maharajji himself was a miracle. Just being around him made the commonplace seem miraculous, and conversely, the miraculous came to seem quite ordinary. Yet, when devotees gather, it is still the miracle stories that come most readily to their lips. Perhaps this is because such stories are tellable, while the ocean of love, the tenderness, the healing compassion with which Maharajji, like Christ, worked his true wonders upon us, these are ineffable. What were these miraculous powers about? Perhaps they served the function that the great saint Shirdi Sai Baba, who used miracles in an outrageous fashion, attributed to them. I give them what they want, so they will want what I give. All the miracles concern the physical universe, the world, the material plane. But the essence of the business that we have with such beings as Maharajji is of the spirit, which is far beyond such miracles. Miracles are only the unexpected, and in the spirit there is no expected, so there is no unexpected. This is how Maharajji became known as Neem Karoli Baba, which means the sadhu from Neem Karoli. This was many years ago, perhaps when Maharajji was in his late 20s or early 30s. For several days, no one had given him any food, and hunger drove him to board a train for the nearest city. When the conductor discovered Maharajji seated in the first class coach without a ticket, he pulled the emergency brake, and the train ground to a halt. After some verbal debate, Maharajji was unceremoniously put off the train. The train had stopped near the village of Neem Karori, where Maharajji had been living. Maharajji sat down under the shade of a tree while the conductor blew his whistle and the engineer opened the throttle. But the train didn't move. For some time, the train sat there while every attempt was made to get it to move. Another engine was called in to push it, but all to no avail. A local magistrate with one arm who knew of Maharajji suggested to the officials that they coax that young sadhu back onto the train. Initially, the officials were appalled by such superstition, but after many frustrating attempts to move the train, they decided to give it a try. Many passengers and railway officials approached Maharajji, carrying with them food and sweets as offering to him. They requested that he board the train. He agreed on two conditions. One, the railway officials must promise to have a station built for the village of Neem Karori. At the time, the villagers had to walk many miles to the nearest station. And number two, the railroad must henceforth treat sadhus better. The officials promised to do whatever was in their power, and Maharajji finally reboarded the train. Then they asked Maharajji to start the train. He got very abusive and said, "What? Is it up to me to start trains?" The engineer started the train. The train travelled a few yards. And then the engineer stopped it and said, "Unless the sadhu orders me, I will not go forward." Maharajji said, "Let him go." And they proceeded. Maharajji said that the officials kept their word, and soon afterward a train station was built at Neem Karori, and sadhus received more respect. An army colonel approached the gate of the army camp and found Maharajji lying on the ground directly in front of the gate. When ordered to move, Maharajji replied that it was God's land and he was with the CID, Central Intelligence Department. The colonel became outraged and told the guards to move Maharajji and jail him in the army stockade. Some hours later, the colonel, after having been out, once again approached the gate. Again, he found Maharajji lying before the gate. The colonel started to yell at the guards for failing to carry out his orders, but they assured him that they had done as he had directed. A check of the stockade revealed that Maharajji was still there. After that, the colonel became a devotee. Maharajji and some devotees spent the night in a dharmshala on the way to Badrinath. Maharajji sent the entire group out of his room and forbade them to enter during the night. They had seen a big cobra on Maharajji's bed. In the morning, Maharajji came out with the cobra and shooed it away. Some time later in Kainchi, Maharajji was told that a cobra was in the ashram. He made a hue and cry, "Cobra is here! Cobra is here!" A devotee remarked to him, "What is this? So much concern for a cobra now? What happened when you slept the whole night with a cobra? Now you're making such a commotion." "You wicked person, go away," Maharajji replied. Maharajji was in Benares with the police superintendent, a devotee. They were going over to a sadhu camp on an island in the middle of Ganga, and the superintendent said, "We'll take a boat." Maharajji countered, "No, we'll go in the water." The superintendent couldn't swim and protested, "Maharajji, it's over our heads." Maharajji replied, "Just put your hand on my shoulder." So they waded into the river, and the next thing the superintendent knew, they were on the island. They returned the same way. People often gave Maharajji blankets. One time, when he was through with the blanket, it suddenly became much smaller, and he said, "Why are you giving me these blankets that are too small?" Maharajji and a devotee had settled in for a journey in the first-class compartment of a train. The devotee felt it would be safer if Maharajji held the tickets until the conductor came, so he gave them to Maharajji. Maharajji looked at them and said, "What is this for?" and threw them out of the window of the moving train. The devotee was shocked but said nothing. As Maharajji continued his conversation, the devotee was worried about the tickets and the conductor. Finally, the conductor knocked on the door and asked to see their tickets. The devotee hesitated a moment and then told Maharajji that the conductor wanted to see the tickets. Maharajji reached out toward the window and then handed the tickets to the devotee. He laughed and said, "Is this what you were worried about?" In 1958, I was acting as a leader of the Landless People movement. I was arrested and charged with 4 counts. 1. Inciting a riot. 2. Trespassing. 3. Attempted murder. And 4. Obstructing a government servant from discharging his duties. I was assured by Maharajji not to worry, that it would turn out all right. But in 1964, I was convicted and sentenced to 4 years imprisonment. I immediately appealed the decision. I was not worried, but my relatives were quite upset and insisted I again go to Maharajji about the case. Maharajji assured me once more that all would turn out okay and added that when a particular judge whom he named was in the office, then the decision would be reversed. The present judge was, in fact, soon transferred, but the replacement was also not the one Maharajji foretold. The case was being argued and was to be completed by the end of a particular day. I thought to myself, how could this be? It was a cold, drizzly day, and the sun had set, and there were still several hours of arguing left, so the judge postponed the case until the next day. On that day, one very important paper was inexplicably missing without a trace, so that the case could not be finished. The judge ordered a further postponement until the paper could be reconstructed, and the reconstruction took 3 years. By that time, now 1968, the judge whom Maharajji had named had been put in that office. The case was dropped under his decision. I was visiting a saint in the south of India who was known for manifesting many things. As I was getting ready to leave, he said to me, Do you want something, Ramdas? No, Babaji, I don't want anything. Here, he said, and held out his hand, palm upward, and started to move it in a slow circular motion. I was still sitting at his feet, so that my eyes were close to his hand, and I watched like a hawk for the least trickery, careful not to blink. But much to my amazement, there appeared to be a bluish light on his hand, which turned into a medallion. The whole business was confusing to me. Why did he do this? I later heard that Maharaj Ji said of such miracles, those these are those siddhis, but they shouldn't be used much. They reduce spirit to magic. And he said of such saints, let them play. Some saints of the south are very much after miracles. Once in Brindavan, before Guru Purnima Day, Maharaj Ji was feeding us by hand. One by one, he would feed us each a pera. I tried to feed him one too. Of course, he didn't eat sugar, but I was insisting, with the thought that this was also prasad. You must eat it, please eat it. So he pretended to eat it. But Naima caught him. You didn't eat it, Maharaj Ji. He looked guilty, as if to say, oh, you caught me. There it was in his hand. He'd palmed it. That precipitated wonderful play as he went into his old magician act. Which hand is it in? Ha, you're wrong. It's in this hand. I don't think he was even using his powers for this game. He really was palming it, hiding it in his blanket, and using sleight of hand, all tricks that any magician can do. But he was saying, see, I'm like Sai Baba. I can make it appear. I can make it disappear. I can do anything. Magic. It's magic. About the miracle Babas, Maharaj Ji would say, what is this? This is all foolishness. He could do miracles, but the greatest miracle was that he could turn one's heart and mind toward God, as he did for me. I have no powers. I don't know anything. Maharaj Ji was actually the biggest saint. He had done all the yogic austerities. There are saints in India, very aged ones, who almost never give darshan to people. Except for the few to whom they were kind, these saints cannot be seen. Sometimes they take the shape of a tiger or a monkey or a beggar. You can only have darshan if they want to give it to you, not otherwise. The true devotees of God never wear saffron, carry malas, or put on sandalwood. You can't know them unless they want it, and then you can only know them as much as they allow. Ma, what am I to do? There is no eye that can follow me. No one knows me. No one understands me. What am I to do? Said 4 days before he left his body. Although miracles were commonplace around Maharaj Ji, they were rarely discussed during his lifetime. The devotees knew, in no uncertain terms, that he did not like these things talked about. When various devotees would sit around and discuss his miracles, Maharaj Ji would call them over and berate them and say, "You're all talking lies." Maharaj Ji said that God does everything and he does nothing. And if people wrote about him, millions of people would come to bother him, drawn only by rumors of miracles. In 1963, a man collected stories about Maharaj Ji. Maharaj Ji said, "You want to bring disgrace? Burn them." He burned them. Another devotee wrote an article, and Maharaj Ji tore up the manuscript. Someone asked Maharaj Ji if he'd allow some pictures to be taken. Maharaj Ji said no and expressed his disapproval. The man pressed Maharaj Ji until finally he ceased to resist. The man snapped 3 or 4 photos. When the roll of film was developed, these 3 or 4 frames were completely blank. If you happened to see him perform some miracle, such as producing puris, he would tell you not to tell anyone. I tell you, it will be bad for you. Don't tell anyone. One time, the car in which Maharajji was riding ran out of gas in a place where there was none to be had nearby. Maharajji instructed the driver to put water in the tank and continue. Then he firmly warned the driver never to tell of this incident for as long as Maharajji was alive. Maharajji said that if the man told, he would contract leprosy. It was some 3 years after Maharajji left his body that the man first told this story. You should not talk about your wealth, wife, or sadhana, or they will go away. Maharajji's strategy obviously worked, for he was known to those he chose to be known to, yet unknown to the population at large. As an example, the Illustrated Weekly of India did an entire issue concerning Indian saints, past and present. Hundreds were listed, yet in the entire magazine he was not even mentioned. Perhaps that was the greatest sign of his power. When the Westerners started to come to Maharajji, he changed. He began to allow photographs to be taken and even gave his blessings for a book, Be Here Now, which allowed millions of seekers in the Western world to hear of Maharajji and his powers. Why he changed is not known. Perhaps he was preparing his legacy. Apparently, Maharajji did not transmit to his devotees any of the powers that he manifested. Perhaps he felt similar to Shirdi Sai Baba, who said, I don't give them powers because I don't want them to lose their way. Rather than any siddhis or yogic powers, Maharajji gave us more basic things: faith, loving hearts, and an acceptance of the reality of the divine. At the same time, he recognized that some of the devotees had desire for such powers, and he enjoyed playing with these people. In 1967, Maharajji asked me, You want to fly? I had a pilot's license at the time, and though I knew that this wasn't what he meant, I said somewhat facetiously, I already can fly, Maharajji. Maharajji ignored my response and said, You want to fly, you'll fly. It was not until 1972, over 4 years later, while working with a mantra under the direction of a Swami, that I experienced astral flying. By then, I had changed and there was nowhere I wanted to go. One of the first things he said to me in 1967 was, You know Gandhi? I know of him, Maharajji. You should be like him. Just by saying that, he started in me a train of righteous power fantasies that went on for years. Only recently have I come to see Gandhi in terms of compassion rather than power. Maharajji's statement made me do much work on myself. To add a bit more fuel to the fire of these attachments of mine, one day Maharajji asked, Did you have tea at Nixon's house? I was puzzled, for the question was without a context. But then I remembered that an Englishman who had settled in Almora many years before, who was known as Krishna Prem and was considered by many Indians to be a saint, had originally been named Nixon. I asked Maharajji if it was this Nixon to whom he referred. No, the one with the big white house in America, the one with the house bigger than Muktananda's. There was no mistaking it now. He meant the president. No, I never did. Then, thinking maybe there was a confusion of generations, I added helpfully, But my father has. Weren't you in Mr. Nixon's house and he gave you tea and was very nice to you? No. Oh, nothing more. Just another little suggestion that perhaps I was to play in the halls of worldly power. And another day he spoke again about the presidency. This time he said, "You know, Lincoln was a very good president." Yes, yes, he was a good president because he knew Christ was a real president. He was only acting president. Oh, yes, he was very good. He helped the poor and suffering. He never forgot Christ. Ah, then he asked, "Did you know Lincoln?" There was an embarrassed silence, for everyone present knew of that impossibility. Then Dada told Maharajji that I couldn't have, since Lincoln died in 1865. It was explained as if to a child. But all of us knew that Maharajji never said things idly. The head of the state police of Uttar Pradesh, the largest state in India, had come for darshan and was sitting at Maharajji's feet and rubbing his legs with obvious devotion. I was called to join them, and Maharajji introduced him to me and asked me whether the police in America were like the police in India. As I looked at this superintendent of state police rubbing Maharajji's legs, I could only laugh at the comparison. I said that the police in America had great power and often forgot they were the servants of the people. And I added that it would be unlikely for the head of any state police to kneel and rub the feet of a holy man. Maharajji then introduced me to the policeman, saying, "This is Ramdas. He is going to bring the police of America to God." I had to laugh. Now he was implying future powers even greater than my fantasies. It was also around this time that Maharajji started calling me Samarth Guru Ramdas. In the past, he had called me by one name or other, like Isha, Jesus, or Kabir, each for a few weeks. Each time a new name appeared, albeit briefly, I would make inquiries as to the nature of the person who had become my namesake and would try it on for size. Jesus I already knew about. Kabir was a great saint, a very poor weaver who preached the unity of all religions and was legendary for his outspoken beliefs in God. His poetry was already much revered in my heart. At first, it seemed that Samarth Guru Ramdas must refer to the Sikh Guru Ramdas. But then I found a book that described a Samarth Guru Ramdas who was Guru to King Shivaji in the 1600s and had constructed many Hanuman temples. The name Samarth meant all powerful, and there are many stories of his miraculous powers. He lived in a mud hut next to the king's palace. The king was highly regarded for his concern for his subjects and for his generous feeding of the poor, but apparently now and then his ego got the best of him. When this happened, the guru would do things like splitting a rock in which there were many tiny bugs and asking the king who was feeding these bugs. This realization of the triviality of his own efforts would again humble the king. I liked this name, and when I wanted all the powers Maharajji seemed to be alluding to, I knew that if he gave me those powers, I would indeed get lost in them. Now and then, however, Maharajji would set me up for an experience that, by allowing me to help him, showed me that the true powers poured forth when one realized, I can do nothing. God does everything. On one occasion, Maharajji said to me, Haridas is in America. You keep him there for 5 years. I knew that Haridas had only a 3-month visa and that to get a permanent visa, that is, to become a registered alien in the United States, is no easy matter. So I said to Maharajji, I can't do that. I have no political power in the United States. But Maharajji would not hear my reply. He just repeated, "You keep Haridas in America for 5 years. I kept Bhagwan Das here for 7 years." The implications of this made me laugh. Here was Maharajji, who had all kinds of powers, making this absurd comparison. My power within the United States government was absolutely zero, so again I protested. But he was equally adamant, so I said that I would certainly work on it. A few days prior to that conversation, a Westerner from Los Angeles, whom I had never met before, came to Nainital to see me. I explained to him that my guru was nearby and took him to see Maharajji, who gave him the name Badrinath Das. The fellow was very taken with Maharajji and genuinely appreciative that I had arranged the meeting. On his last day in Nainital, which was the day after the Haridas conversation with Maharajji, Badrinath Das thanked me again and asked me if there was anything he could do for me in the States. I asked him, "For instance, what?" And he told me that he was a successful lawyer in Los Angeles. At the moment, I could not think of any friends who were in trouble, but I thanked him for the offer. Then, as an afterthought, I said, "I have a family full of lawyers, but the only legal thing I need now is to get Haridas Baba a long-term visa in America." And I explained to him Maharajji's orders. Badrinath Das said, "Gee, it's funny you should need that. My brother in law happens to be the director of the Western United States Office of Immigration, and we should be able to arrange it with one letter." And so it was done. When Haridas came to the immigration department for an interview, his folder had special VIP stickers on it, and his alien visa was granted with no difficulty. Obviously, Maharajji had known how it all would happen, but instead of bringing it out with Badrinath Das himself, he let me help him. But while with one hand Maharajji played with my desires for worldly power, with the other he subtly uprooted them. One day, while I was sitting with Maharajji and KK, many CID men came to have Maharajji's darshan. They were in attendance upon Indira Gandhi, who was visiting nearby. After they left, Maharajji said, "What good is all that? A king can only order his men to obey, but a saint can order wild beasts and animals to obey, and they would do so also." Between this belittlement of a worldly king, the Samarth Guru Ram Das stories, and Lincoln's appreciation of who the real president was, Maharajji impressed upon me the very real limits of the worldly power that most humans seek. These teachings have continued to work upon me since that time. Before the votes for the presidential election were counted, Maharajji exclaimed, "Giri has won." And he had. Maharajji never wanted any publicity, and he always tried to avoid VIPs. He kept away from devotees who became important. They would often tell me, "He used to visit us often, but now that he has placed us on that throne, he has forsaken us. He won't come anymore. I wish he hadn't put us there. At least we would be able to have his darshan." India's Prime Minister Nehru flew into the Calcutta airport one day en route to Assam. An airport conference was held for the press, attended both by reporters and by government officials. As Nehru spoke, another plane landed nearby and passengers disembarked. A few minutes later, Nehru noticed that his audience had shrunk and some of the people had made their way to the newly arrived plane. Nehru questioned his advisers, the closest of whom was an old devotee of Maharajji. He told Nehru that Baba Neem Karoli was on that plane and the people were rushing to have his darshan. Nehru expressed great surprise and said, India is fortunate indeed if there exists a saint so great that people will leave their Prime Minister to see him. Maharajji was a follower of Advaitwad. He saw his own soul in everybody. For him, it was all one. Maharajji was like Krishna. Sometimes he was like God, and sometimes he was like an ordinary person. Outwardly, he is a man, but he is not a man. He used to talk here, but he was somewhere else. He can cause his Atma to enter into any person at any time to get his work done. His body was burned and can't return, but his Atma can come in any form. In a dream, he told me, You can have my darshan, but not in this form. One summer evening, we were sitting around Maharajji, who was lying on his back, seemingly very far away and blissful. I was holding his right hand and quietly began to study the lines on it. Maharajji roused a little and in a faraway voice asked me what it was I was seeing in his palm. I told him, Maharajji, it says in your palm that you will have God's darshan. Like a small child with an air of delighted secrecy, he whispered to a nearby devotee, Oh, they have found out. I am the father of the world. The whole world is my child. Brahmachari Maharaj was a great saint, highly revered in the Kumon hills. When he and Maharajji met, Brahmachari Maharaj did Danda Pranam. It was a hot day, and Brahmachari Maharaj sent Tewari to get water for making a lassi. Brahmachari Maharaj drank water only from a distant spring, so Tewari was some time in getting the water. When he returned, Brahmachari Maharaj berated him. You have no insight. You don't understand. This was no ordinary saint. Maharajji could drink tap water. It doesn't matter for him. Once Maharajji arrived in Lucknow and met Sri Brahmachari Maharaj. After a brief greeting, they entered an inner room and bolted the door. When 15 or 20 minutes had passed, the door opened and Sri Brahmachari Maharaj came out, his face shining. He stood silently, smiling. Maharajji could be seen inside the room in a peculiar mudra. His entire body appeared like a round, soft body. He came out almost at once, and his body appeared to be very reddish in color. For a few silent moments, the two saints stood together. Then Maharajji left. When Gandhi was shot and all were crying, Brahmachari Maharaj asked, Why is everyone crying? When he was told, he said, There is only one being in India who could bring him back to life, and that is Neem Karoli Baba. Maharajji fed puris to a visiting Swami from Shivananda ashram and told him to sit in the cave behind the temple. The Swami, however, felt very attracted to Maharajji and soon returned to him. Maharajji then sent him to sit under the big tree, a position from which he could watch Maharajji. In front of his eyes, the Kainchi scene transformed into the Shivananda ashram in Rishikesh, and Maharajji became Shivananda. Then Maharajji Shivananda walked up to the Swami and said, Do you think there is any difference between us? Are we not the same? The Swami said, You are there in that form too. You are really only he. You are deluding me in this form. Maharajji said nothing in reply. He only smiled. I am everybody's guru.